Welcome to our Bucky meeting for the weekend of October 28th, 29th. And uh, Joe, you're at the hospital. How are you feeling and what do you expect to get out of tonight? And if you need to leave at any time, feel free just to mute or go dark. But if you want to make an opening statement, get her started tonight, that would be appreciative. How you
Yeah, I
feel?
mean,
Go
I
ahead.
feel, I feel okay. My mother's here, with, in the hospital, and and I'm just, and I'm just trying to, you know, kind of, stick with my routine, and I'm extremely grateful, uh, to be with you here this evening. Be with Ann and you, Steve, and Manu will be here shortly. And yeah, and my expect to get out of this evening is I expect to be a little bit distracted for a couple, for the time that we're on. And so that's my expectation. And how are you feeling? What would you like to take away?
Okay, I'm glad to be able to make it every Sunday as for the past months, yeah. And okay, so I'm actually reading the self-discipline. I'm going it on one by one, and I intend to go through it, and I'm picking out all the things that are I think is critical for us. I'm figuring out how to get it through to parents and the students, and the community. So, but I think the first one to start is actually my my team. So I'm gonna go towards that first. Um, every time I get started, I haven't been able to go all the way to 25 because I get caught up with something he's saying there and I get stuck, And then after that, do something else, I go back. So yeah, that's my intention this week to get through the 25, the self-discipline. So looking forward today as well to move on with the next section of critical path. And I realize it's 510 pages. Yeah. So that'll be good.
That's an epiphany. That's an epiphany.
So then, yes, Steve, how do you feel and what do you expect to take away today?
I'm feeling pretty good. I'm having a little technical difficulties over on this side of my computer, and I noticed I had a few last week as well. And so I'm hoping to get through those with the least amount of issues. And I'm real grateful that we're having this conversation. After last week, I did a whole thing on that needle. Do you guys recall when we read about the needle floating? The evidently Bucky says in fact, I'm having trouble opening up my, okay, I think it's working now. Hang on. Yep, it's working. So good. I'll just share the screen and show you where there we go. Share sound. Okay. And start here. Whoops. Okay. Okay. Chewy, pardon me. All righty. It was back here where he talked about the needle. Let me see here. Okay, good. I'm going to look for the needle. Because this bothered me. We read it last time. This also involves, he was talking about general principles and how principles augment and are regenerative. They're augmentative and regenerative, and they can never be compromised or never be countered. And he's talking about these general principles up above. He talks about E equals mc squared. And I see a typo right there. So, and he reads, this also involves a mathematical principle that a system's linear dimension grows at a first power rate. we read over this last time and I had to read it 3 times. While its surface grows at a second power rate and its volume grows at a third power rate. That's very interesting. Somehow a linear dimension affects, grows at a certain thing, and then surface grows at a second power. If Manu was here, he'd probably try to help me understand this, and third power. So I think this has to do with a square and a cube calculation on linear dimensions. But then he goes on and says, a needle with an initial length of 6 feet and a diameter of 2 inches having a slenderness, a length to ratio, an L to R ratio of 36:1 is reduced to a needle 3 inches long with a diameter of 0.083333 of an inch. The 6-foot needle sinks to the water, and the 3-inch needle floats on the water. Its volume, ergo, its weight, has become so negligible that its surface relates only to the surface tension of the water, its weight being much less than can be supported by the atomic interactions producing the molecular membrane of the water surface. Well, got to tell you, I jumped into this thing and spent quite a bit of time. Let's see if I got the needle stuff here. I don't. The needle stuff is probably up here. Here it is. And so I did some work on this, and a metal needle or a paper clip has higher density than that of water. So when it is dropped into water, it falls down into the bottom of the water. However, if we put it horizontally on the water with a lot of caution, it can float almost forever due to surface tension of the water. So why does a small needle sink in water? Density of iron is more than density of water, so the iron needle sinks in the water. Needles displace more water than its weight. The weight of the needle is less than the weight of the fluid displaced by the body. Specific gravity of the needle is greater than the water displaced by it. This is why a small needle will sink. So now, then it says, and this even compares, why does a small needle sink when a ship floats? And then conversation about how much water is displaced. And then now we come to this question, what force is acting on a needle floating in water? It's surface tension. An iron needle, when placed horizontally on water, floats, it sits on the surface of water. The phenomena is usually justified as surface tension. Bucky tries to explain that surface tension principle here. Anyway, I jumped into it, and I suddenly realized I was way over my head, but that was the last paragraph we read last week, and it sent me into a tizzy. Any comment on that? I don't expect there to be.
Well, you know, I mean, it's interesting to read about water displacement and think about it. The first sentence is that this also involves a mathematical principle that a system's linear dimension grows at a first power rate. I'd like to understand that a little bit more at some point, because you know, we were just talking about, I was at a conference yesterday. Really, you guys would have loved it, or, you know, Bucky would have loved it, everybody would have loved it. And it was on energy, and I was just talking about exponential growth rates versus some of these linear predictions that people tend to make. And actually reminded me of Bucky. And anyway, that just made me think about that. That's what came to mind for me for a moment. Actually thought about Malthus for a moment as well. But because of the linear versus the exponential growth. Anyway, that's something that came up.
Okay. So
I have something
I
to
just
say.
want to go ahead, Ann.
Yes, I want to say thank you because I didn't even think to look backwards at this because I was reading it like I would do when I'm learning science in school, you know. So you're taking us one step backwards in order to go forwards. So and generally it stays as it is, whatever information is given, right? But what you've done is actually taken us to that next step to show the fascination behind this whole idea of the needle, comparing it with um, ships that float and a little needle sinking. Yeah. And I think that's fascinating. So thank you very much for that. Yeah. Steve.
Well, thank you. Thank you,
Mm,
because it's a little bit but just repeating it with you, I actually figured something out here. I understood what
mm,
Bucky's saying at a little different level. He's bringing up 3 points here, and I'm going
mhm,
to see if I can okay, so this also involves mathematical principle that a system's linear dimension grows at a first power. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Then he says, while its surface grows at a second power rate. And suddenly, as you guys were talking about it, it dawned on me the formula for the circumference of a circle. The circumference of a circle is pi r squared. Isn't that right? Circumference equals pi r squared. In other words, the surface grows at a second power rate. So here's the linear. As the linear
mm,
dimension grows, the surface grows at a second power rate. And the linear dimension is the radius.
mm.
The radius squared times pi gives us the circumference. I don't know. Maybe it's not. I was just thinking that. I wish Manu were here to talk about the math of it all, but breaking it out, that's what I came up with. So we're taking a step back, exactly right, which I like to do, and I like to make sure that we get as clear as possible as things. But the big issue here is surface tension, and I think his whole idea of tensegrity, he was into tension and tensegrity as a critical element of his geodesic domes and everything that he did. So these are obviously general principles that I don't understand, and I'm complete now.
Okay, putting it this way, it looks very, very clear, very nice, yeah. And now the mathematical principle here actually has to do also with linear is one-dimensional, and
Right.
surface then becomes two-dimensional, which is, and volume is actually three-dimensional. So because we teach, you see, we took the trouble to teach children distance, area, volume, linear line, area, volume in half an hour at one fell swoop, because technically in most curriculum they divide up over 3 years, and when it's introduced at 3 separate times and not linked, it doesn't make sense. So when we introduce the minute the kids can count lines, then we also teach them area and volume at the same time. So you're counting units, and when you count lines, it's just line units, right? When you count surface area, you're counting squares. So the minute you can count 1 to 10, you can count lines, you can count squares, and volume is counting cubes. So it's the same thing, except that you're counting lines, squares, and cubes. So, and then the volume is three-dimensional, so you're calculating it upwards as well. So the line, length, breadth, and the height.
Got it. And I put those are great insights. They make a lot of sense to me. You just helped me look at this another way. And I made a comment about your one-dimensionality, your two-dimensionality, and your three-dimensionality. I stuck that over here on the side. I think that's really totally illuminating. Thank you. And I hope I got it right. Did I miss anything?
No, that's correct. And actually, it's also like when you talk about the squaring and the cubing, right? So it's you multiply something twice, you multiply something 3 times. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, 2 times 2 is you square it, and 2 times 2 times 2 is you cube it. Yeah.
Cool. And that your explanation maybe has more to do with it than what I wrote out over here. So Congratulations.
But it's because you put it that like this, first power, second. Otherwise, I didn't see it either, you know.
Yeah,
Mm.
I love it. So this is cool. And I'm gonna see about doing this. Pardon me while I take time to mess around with my, oh, come on. That thing just went white right there. Okay, good. Because that's what my machine was doing last week and I couldn't do it. So anyway, now that took care of that. Okay, well, having looked at all that, we're now ready. Is everybody ready to proceed with our actual reading? Okay, let's go for it. And I don't know, Joe, you're kind of distracted over there. In fact, he's muted himself. So I'm going to read for a minute, and then Ann, you can read if you'd like to read, okay?
Okay, sure.
This also invites the mathematical principle that a system's linear dimension. Oh, we already, there it is right there. We already read that, and that's what we went through. And so here we go. To demonstrate frequency in pure principle, I observe painfully that I cannot put my finger through the plane of a revolution of a swiftly rotating airplane propeller and withdraw it before it gets hit. Yet machine guns can be timed to fire bullets between successively revolving propeller blades. Did you know that this about airplanes in World War II? That they had airplanes, they had the propeller airplanes. And when the fighters would shoot their bullets, they had to time the bullets. They'd pull the trigger, but the guns would not shoot unless it was perfect timing for the bullet to pass between the spinning propellers. Otherwise, the planes would have shot off their own propellers.
Huh.
And that's what Bucky is pointing out here. What's that?
Didn't know this. I didn't know this at all.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Machine guns can be timed to fire bullets between successfully revolving propeller blades, but there's no way a human brain can stick their finger in a spinning propeller and pull it out before the finger gets hit by the propeller. So that's very interesting. My muscle and brain cannot reflex and act that fast. I might get my finger through once, but I can't get it back. I might be able to put it through once, but I can't get it back in time. Whoop, bam, on the way back is when it gets chopped off. Operationally speaking, solid means very high frequency, present in pure principle. Wow. So he's now saying that operationally speaking, solid means very high frequency, present in pure principle. That's interesting. So he doesn't see solids as solids. He sees solids as just, you can't pull your finger out in time. And so that's interesting. I can see through my glasses because light moving through only one way at 186,000 miles per second has ample time to avoid frequency of interference events occurring locally in pure principle. So he's talking about the fact that while he can't put his finger in and out of the propeller, and while they can time bullets through propeller, light is not affected. There's no interfering events from light. Because it's so fast. That's what he's intimating here, is that the speed of the light moving is what makes it pass through glass. Interesting.
Why only glass?
What's that?
Why only glass?
Well, he just points that out as one phenomenon. Because what he's saying right here, he sums it up right here. There are no solids. There are no things. There are only interfering and non-interfering patterns operative in pure principle. And principles are eternal principles, never contradict. And principles are eternal. Principles never contradict principles. Principles can interaccommodate. And there's some, I'm going to mark that in my book because that's really a nice description of principles. That's at the bottom of page 158. And it goes in with the stuff he put up at the top of the page 158, where he talks about generalized principles as well. Pardon me while I put those things together and make a note of my book. Really cool. Shall we continue? Shall we continue? Shall we continue to read, or did you have another comment or question?
No, I like it. I'm fascinated by this too. Yeah, and I think I was just talking to my colleagues at work. Yeah,
Yeah.
that actually we should be able to go through each other because all our what do you call atoms or whatever actually are all floating. We're not even attached, you know.
Right.
So technically, yeah,
It's the molecules.
yes,
Molecules
molecules.
aren't attached, but inside molecules are atoms, which are also not attached.
Mm.
Are just held together by energy field, and there's more space than there is solid, anything solid, and yet we still can't do it. And I'm sure it relates to this idea that about non-interfering patterns.
Yeah.
There are no solids, there are no things, there are only not interfering and non-interfering patterns.
Yep. Fascinating.
Yeah. Are you interested? I'm gonna see, to me, these things are really cool. There's a really cool thing here called, it's called quantum chromodynamics. And let's see if, here comes Manu. And it's Veritasium. And what it's called is that empty space is not empty, is what it's called. Hello, Manu.
Hi, Manu.
Hello, how are you? Let me lower down the volume of this thing.
Welcome back. How did South Africa play?
World champion,
The world champion. How cool is that?
back to back, back to back.
Wow, wow. Congratulations.
When I heard that the UK lost and it was between Africa and New Zealand, I knew you would not. That there's a good chance you might miss the event tonight. So I'm glad you showed up.
Oh no.
Okay, I wanted to show Ann. This is an idea, and Ann, I'm going to drop this in, and he's explaining how empty space is not empty, and he talks about how it talks about how empty space is, and then right here he talks about how this guy, in fact, I think the guy might be from New Zealand. We're going to see here. Here we go. We'll pick him up right here.
The building blocks of protons and neutrons, and how they interact with each other through gluons.
What you're looking at here is the energy density of the gluon field fluctuations. Where the little red spots come out, the energy density is very high, and it fades down through the colors. And the lowest energy field fluctuations I'm not rendering in this animation so that we can actually see into it.
And what we see is a bubbling soup of quantum field fluctuation.
So this is showing all the space between the energy that pops up, and these little red spots that show up, they are quarks. They're quarks, and this is how energy is manifesting. And so there's a quark right there, and this is the quantum flux field. So you can, I'll put this in the chat, and you can show this to your teachers, because this is exactly why it explains how much space there is between any particles, and that empty space is not empty, it's bubbling up with this energy. So this is kind of a fun thing. Any questions on that?
Thank you.
I'm going to put it in there. There's the link, and I'm going to put the title right here.
What is energy?
Oh, you didn't get to see that. Did you get to see it?
I say, what is energy?
Did you see this chart before?
Yes.
Okay, good.
But what is energy?
What is energy, Manu?
I don't know. Energy is energy. It is.
Yeah, it is. Energy is the nature of the universe. Everything is energy.
Is it experience?
I'm actually going to put this in my book, so I could talk about it for a
We
long time.
see,
I'm going to resist.
we see manifestation of energy, but what is energy?
Yeah, it's vibration. It's everything in constant flux.
So we have to accept it as being in, as it is. See, by the simple fact that our experience is spherical, it means it is finite. Spherical means it turns. That's what spherical means. And when anything turns, there's a high chance that it comes back to where it was before it turns. That's why we have spherical experiences. And things are spherical, they are finite. And that we can see, we can see something finite. We cannot see something that is not finite.
We
When I
cannot
mean
see
see,
something that is not finite. Yeah.
yes, when I mean see is sense. Because sensing has fundamentally to do with recycling, with a cycle. Without
Yeah.
cycle, there's no sense.
Yeah, we just read, Manu, you kind of walked in on the middle of a conversation, but we were just reading in Critical Path here where he points out that he can put his finger, that the chances of him being able to put his finger through a spinning propeller on an airplane is very slim. He might be able to make it in, but he wouldn't make it out before he got his
Yes.
finger hit. But yet
Yes.
they can time bullets to be shot out of the gun on the airplane. So the bullets go out and they miss the blade, even
Yes.
though the thing run in front of them. And then he points out there are no solids, there are no things, there are only interfering, non-interfering patterns operative in principle. And principles are eternal, principles never contradict principles, and principles are inter-accommodate one another only in non-interfering frequency ways. And so when you ask what is energy, then a good conversation is, well, what is electromagnetic energy? There's a chart that shows electromagnetic energy. These are slow moving waves down here. These are broadcast waves, radio waves. And then we have television sets, then we have microwaves, then we have radar, and then we have other kinds of equipment here. And then here's sun energy. And these are the size of the molecules down here, or the size of the frequency. The size of the frequency occurring is huge. With radio broadcasting, they're the size of buildings. When we get into 3 hertz, we get into the size of single-celled animals. And when we get down into near ultraviolet energy here, these are the size of molecules, 10 to the -8. And then when we get down into soft X-rays or X-rays, these are the size of electrons or atoms. And then when we get into gamma rays, they're the size of neutrons and protons that form atoms. But here's how fast the frequency waves move. That shows how fast they're moving. These are very slow, and these are very fast. So that's energy, Manu.
Exactly.
That-
Note that you say the frequency wave.
Yeah, frequency.
Is the frequency of something. What is that thing? I'm teasing you. All right. So to buttress what Bucky is saying, you always feeling energy in its interaction.
Right.
Radiative, that is pulsative, and contractive, that is gravitational. Radiation, that's why you have waves.
Right.
So when somebody say, okay, what is energy? You say it is something that is radiative and gravitational. You're just describing a way that it is. It manifests. You can't say this is energy. Energy is what it is. We are all made of energy.
Yeah.
So an electron cannot describe what we are
Right.
as being part of it. The electron will not be able to. So in relative scale, that's the same thing for us. We are probably 1 electron or even sub of what is going on in what we will say is universe. I'm true. I just
Good.
wanted
Complete?
to buttress what Bucky is saying there.
Right on. Any comments or questions, Anne? Any comments or
Um,
questions?
No, I think I'm okay. Thank
Me
you.
too.
Thank you for. Mm.
Acknowledging the mathematically elegant intellectual integrity of eternally regenerative universe is one way of identifying God. Well, that's interesting.
What does it mean?
Well, a couple places in this section, he's talked about God a little bit.
Yeah, but what does it mean if you read this sentence, acknowledging the mathematically elegant intellectual integrity of eternally regenerative universe in one way is one way of identifying God? What is acknowledging?
Acknowledging is be aware of and admitting that it's real.
Accepting.
Accepting.
It means that you have to accept the eternal in general principle. You can, will you go and defy gravity? Maybe for a while, for some purpose, but you won't defy gravity forever, is it?
Yeah, not for very long, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Everything the brain deals with relates to high frequency thingness. Mind and mind alone deals with understanding the interrelationships existing only between and not in any one principle. I read that weird, and I'm going to read it again. I found something else too that relates to that, and I printed it out this week. But everything the brain deals with relates to high frequency thingness. Mind and mind alone deals with understanding the interrelationships existing only between and not in any one principle, considered only by itself. Principles themselves are often subsets of interrelationships existing only between specific principles. I like that. Principles themselves are often subsets of interrelationships existing only between specific principles.
What does it say? What does it say, Steve? And what does it say? You've understood, you've heard of the principle of duality, right?
Sure.
Okay.
He say everything the brain is relate to high frequency fineness. Is it where we are? So there's always, we can only express relationship between two things at minimum. Two. Right?
Okay.
So it's always a relationship. So a relationship is between things. And it's between two things. And further it says, it's always 2 on 2. That's why you have the duality, and you always have the 2 to the power of something in the expression of these things.
Cool. Let us know when you're complete with your share.
No, I am. I was just saying that you was talking there about the principle and the fundamental general principle of duality.
Okay. I have I was doing something on hyperbolic geometry, listening to a podcast the other day, and it said almost the same thing, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. Here we go. Okay. God may also be identified as the synergy of interbehavioral relationships of all the principles unpredicted by the behaviors or characteristics of any of the principles considered only separately. Here's another statement about the nature of God. looks like I'm gonna have to come back and I don't want to take time. If somebody else were reading, I would be marking in my book right here.
Do you want me to read? You want me to read, Steve?
Okay, we're right there with the synergetic, right on that word right there.
Okay. Can I read it?
Please do.
The synergetic integral of the totality of all principles is God, whose sum total behavior is pure principle is beyond our comprehension and is utterly mysterious to us, because as human, in pure principle, we do not and never will know all the principles. Apparently, the integrity of the synergy of all synergies of all principles is continually testing its own comprehensive adequacy to accommodate all changes in pure principle to the maintenance in pure principle of the principle of non-simultaneous overlapping, affected, complex unities, eternal regeneration.
Any comments or
Realize
questions? Okay, no comments or questions. Let's continue to go.
Realization that the foregoing may be true tends to inform human that the introduction into universe of humans in principle, with minds operating in pure principle, capable of apprehending and objectively employing in pure principle some of the eternal principles, were courageously undertaken by God to discover whether the principle of the eternally regenerative integrity of universe can endure inviolate despite the dichotomy of knowledge brought about by introduction into the cosmic system of humans and their minds with access to and employment of some, but not all, of the eternal principles. This was an experiment in pure principle to test the adequacy of the synergy of synergies of principle to cope with the sometimes perverse, egotistical, selfish, and deceitful initiatives inherent in the concept of humans. In pure principle, without access to the wisdom accruing synergetically only to knowledge of all the principles. Ergo, possibly capable of impairing the integrity of eternal regeneration. That may be what the integrity of God needs to know and need to know by experimental evidence.
I have a theory of what that means, but it's very local to me, but I really get it. That God needs to know by experimental evidence. There's in the ancient Egyptian mysticism, there's a book called the Kabbalion. And in this Kabbalion, which is different than Kabbalah, which is Hebrew mysticism, this is Egyptian mysticism, which preceded Hebrew mysticism and which preceded Christian mysticism, that the all existed before anything was, and that the all decides to have an experience, to learn more about itself. So the all individuates into little fractals of itself and goes out to have experiences, which would really reiterate what this says. That may be what the integrity of God needs to know, and needs to know by experimental evidence. You and I are individuated parts of God, and we're having our experience, and we're gathering evidence in our experience. Pardon me for the sidebar, but that's what that meant to me. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, thank you for that sidebar, because the only thing I got was what we've spent quite a number of months on, which is somewhere at the top. Okay, what is it now? Oh dear. The integrity of eternal regeneration. Where is it now? The point is that I've just understood that, and now he's got this whole paragraph. So thank you for that summary.
Okay, good.
Mm.
What I think that one of the fundamental messages of this passage is that God is all and everything, assuming the general principle that's true everywhere, and that human beings' experience is local, and that, as Steve said, if we are fractal, it means we have the capacity of stirring something locally to observe what it is, because as individual, on even we may never fathom the whole principles, all the principles that make universe, that always hold whatever in all the forms. So individually, we might never experience that. But locally, we have the capacity of disturbing the thing and see how it repairs, how it heals itself. So that is what maybe Steve might say, that universe kind of split into fractals. And now it's testing again how it comes. It will come. I will come into unity.
Yeah. And actually in the Kybalion, it says that these individuated parts of the all remerge with the all. And then it says, mystery of mysteries, these individuated parts are more individuated than they were before they left, which is very interesting to me, because in a lot of religions, people think that we die and go to God and we just float around as clouds. And in the Kybalion, it says we go back to God and we don't float around as clouds. We're individuated, more individuated than we were before, hinting to the idea that we might do that again. Cool. Any other thoughts? I certainly don't mean to be hijacking this conversation. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, good. I see that Joe is being very thoughtful here. That is what I am thinking about in ever rethinking the Lord's Prayer. It's also, and my part of my thing is in the way here. It's also what I'm thinking about in volume 2 of Synergetics. I think it is probably an intuitive awareness of the possible verity, parts, or all of the foregoing that makes the theologist disregard the science brain-induced requirement of a cosmic beginning and ending. That makes the theologist disregard the scientist's brain-induced requirement of a cosmic beginning and ending. Okay, all scientists have brains only, and only coordinate the special case information of progressively comprehended, special case information progressively apprehended in pure principle by the separate senses operating in pure mathematical frequency principle. Brain then sorts out the information to describe and identify special whole system characteristics, storing them in the memory bank as system concepts for single or multiple recall, for principle seeking consideration and reconsideration as system integrities by searching and ever reassessing mind. He's kind of explaining consciousness here, isn't he? Only minds have. Go ahead, Anne.
Sorry, I'm really glad we didn't finish the whole thing last week, because I was thinking that at the point where we stopped, towards the end of the chapter, there'll be so much more clarity as to what he's talking about. But this whole section on its own is opening a whole different mind space, I would say, for me. And the other thing is, coincidentally, I realized that I'm watching Young Sheldon at the moment. Okay, I've not watched the whole series, so I'm at season 3 right now. But the first two seasons, there's a lot of him being I guess he was questioning religion, because we never got to see Sheldon Cooper, when he was younger, where his life revolved around religion, because the mom is very she's God-fearing, and she really follows the tenets of religion, right? So in church, he would ask all sorts of questions, and you can see the pastor being completely frustrated, okay, by Sheldon, right? But in it, there were times where both religion and science crossed in that series. So now I'm actually looking at the brilliance of Big Bang Theory and Young Sheldon. Okay, so I'm just thought, just coincidentally.
Cool.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Sorry about that.
No, it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I-
Okay,
Okay.
Joe, go on before I write it.
you sure?
You want me to
You can
share
go
what
ahead.
I have?
Okay. Yeah, please.
Well, I think what he's saying here is very important. He said that everything that we ever considered as general principle is always in pairs, in duality. Is always a relationship between principles. He said we are utterly unable, and it doesn't mean that exists a pure principle on its own. It's always in relationship. And Becky says the minimum relationship, he says unity is plural at the minimum of 2 relationships. What people underscore and don't say often is that they just say a minimum of 2, is at the minimum of 2 relationships. Unity is plural at the minimum of 2 relationships. And he goes on here to say, for example, locally, if that relationship is true, that unity is plural at minimum of 2, there's brain and mind. That's the unity. And in the relationship of brains and mind, he's telling what brain does. He says brain receives, brain sort out, and brain stores. Right?
Yeah.
Brain receive, sort out, and store, meaning storing in categories in such a way that they can be recalled easily. Easily by what? By the man. And he's going to go on to explain that.
Yeah. Instead of saying receives, he says apprehends.
Yeah.
And then he says sorts out. And then he says stores.
Yeah.
Mm.
For multiple recall. Yeah. Cool. Any other comments, thoughts, or questions?
I was just going to make, just to build on what Manu had just said. The idea of the brain-mind relationship.
Right.
I do think that is obviously one of the essential concepts, not only for the obvious reasons of when you're talking about the idea of consciousness, but also from the perspective that how things relate to one another so that they can actually work together. How a biological system works in conjunction with the mind. And the reason I think that that's actually important is because it shows how two things interact and can work together. And that to me is the same thing related to kind of non-zero sum games. And how, duality, is essentially unity is plural is minimum two is always means that there is a win-win situation. And that's very different than looking at things solely based on empirical evidence.
Right on. And then he goes on, only minds have the capability to discover principles. Once in a very great while, scientists' minds discover principles and put them to rigorous physical tests before accepting them as principle. More often, theologists or others discover principles, but then do not subject them to the rigorous physical special case testing before accepting and employing them as working assumption principles. Principles are eternal. Special case interactions of principles are temporal and brain apprehensible, because in pure principle we have time, which is simply the principle of potentially different relative frequencies and not of beginnings and endings. That's the end of that chapter or that section. Any comments or questions on that?
Yes, I have a question. This chapter is on self-discipline, and he ends it with principles. Okay. So the progression of self-discipline to principle, this whole chapter, is there a shortcut? Can someone help me pull all this together? Because I know I'm going to have to sit through to figure this out.
What do you need to pull together?
So
Yeah, because he talks about self-discipline. So
Right.
And then is he trying to say that at the end of the day, self-discipline is about principles? Generalized principles?
I think self-discipline is not to jump to conclusions within special cases. So that's the way I look at it, in the sense that just because you have evidence in this one particular instance doesn't mean it's a universal principle, and that we should ought to rely on principles rather than, and that is a discipline. Not to get ahead of ourselves. And then the mind's ability to discover universal principles is interesting to me, is that how we can come to these universal principles. And I think that comes back to the whole brain-mind relationship. But the way I look at it is self-discipline is not necessarily not assuming that you have all the answers. I don't know.
I like that. I like that, Joe, because it's, for me, it's very difficult to make any sense out of a lot of what Bucky says. He seems to be connecting dots that I don't normally connect. I mean, as I'm reviewing the self-discipline of Buckminster Fuller chapter, at the beginning, he outlines different events that that different epiphanies or awarenesses that came to him. And this is chapter 4, which is part 2. And prior to this, he went through and established his chronophile, his, all the things that he had done in his life and the timeline for doing them. So this is part 2. This is chapter 4, Self-Disciplines of Buckminster Fuller. He kind of goes back through his life experience and outlines what his goals and objectives. What he did at the age of 12, he was challenged by Robert Burns. In 1917, he was married, and he goes through and talks about how he sought to do his own thinking. That was principle number 9. Number 10, I'm probably, it shouldn't be using the word principle. He just under self-discipline, he goes, 1, my father died when I was 15. 2, my grandmother taught me the golden rule. 3, and it continues on. Later on, he talks about getting married, coping with unfavorable conditions. Yeah, it's good to ponder. And then in this section, he reimagined the Lord's Prayer. He rethought through the Lord's Prayer and came up with quite a topological discussion about the Lord's Prayer, and which caused me to go back through and do a bunch of Google searches and looking at the Greek and at the difference between the Lord's Prayer in Matthew and in Luke, and differences in the Greek wording as opposed to the English wording, and which kind of related to something that I had done with the Lord's Prayer when I was 8 and 9 and 10 years old. So this chapter's been really good for me, but I'm not so sure, and that I could tell you exactly how these general principles relate to his self-disciplines, other than the fact that he seems to be absolutely committed to the idea that whatever's going on, there are these principles and they do not contradict each other, and that religion doesn't empirically test their principles and science occasionally does. And I think he's trying to say he has constantly tested the general principles to make sure they actually work. I don't know. That's kind of my sense as I look through these pages of this chapter 4.
Okay,
Anybody
thank you
else?
very much.
Yeah, anybody else have anything to say about this?
Yeah, I have something to say. The self-disciplines of Becky were undertaken very teleologically. At the beginning, he asked himself a very big question. How could one man who have, or woman who has nothing, seemingly, do something that no government, no one else has done, that has the potential to benefit the whole humanity in ways that are disproportionate? That was the question. And he felt like the only way to do it is to record very, very minutially what he's doing, is the guinea pig of his own experiment. And he went about recording those. And he came to the realization in awe that, well, God is a minutiae in comparison to the eternally regenerative truth that is God, and that he has to accept it. And then now, having accepted it, he goes into the locality manifestation of general principles. And that's why he says, always in relationship that you can apprehend them. It's impossible for the individual to apprehend and not to say comprehend just one. It is always in relationship to another principle that we can apprehend those things and comprehend them. And he ends up saying that a special case of interaction of principles are temporal, because our form as human being is finite. And you can only see it's temporal because we have, he say in pure principle, we have time. And go further to explain what is time. Time is the lag between two patterns. time is not a dimension that has a beginning and ending. And that's my understanding of it. You start with an experiment because it was theological, because he had in mind what he intended for. He goes about it and follow the evidence that he is in. He cannot possibly comprehend everything that makes the integrity of this eternally regenerative system. So you acknowledge it by the Lord's Prayer. You acknowledge that, and then once you acknowledge it, then you can go now and test the things in the limited of the locality and temporarily. Temporarily means what we can ever apprehend or measure is the lag between two things that we are identify and store. I saw Steve, and Steve is, let's just say that, okay, I've always lived in Africa, right? Or let's just get what we call the black swan. I've always seen white swans, right? So I'm in ignorance that there are black swans. And one day appears a black swan, which in its own context is the majority there. Is always seeing a black swan. But I'm a white swan, I see a black swan. It is a swan like me, but that is black. Therefore, there was a lag between my two experiments, and that is time. It is not that time existed from one point to another, like a dimension. Remember, we define dimension as the curvature, as the length of events curving, so that we don't see it anymore. Because if it is in straight line, something is happening. Let's say a ball is thrown. If a ball grows in straight line, it is following one dimension, right? If it curves, because there was wind somewhere and it goes somewhere else, we don't see the ball anymore. In order for us to see that ball, we have to have traveled this direction and then position ourselves at a different angle of veering to see the course of a ball. That is the second dimension. Note that the first dimension had the beginning and an ending. And curve for a second dimension here, that will curve again, another dimension, curve again to come to the beginning here. Well, this will be time, because I've seen the ball going like that, like that, like that, and coming back here. You see what I'm saying? It's only the lag between two identified patterns. That is time. Time is not something that is on its own. That is that curvature that I saw like this. Does it make sense? Or have I confused you more?
Oh, actually, it's thank you, Manu. Thank you very
You're a
much.
good teacher.
Yes, that's the entire chapter.
Well, I think that's what Becky is saying. He said, okay, he sense, he apprehend that there is more than what has been taught. Let's just say in the conventional, in your context, and there is more than what education is stuffing our kids' mind with. But you don't know what that's more. You have to go through experimentation into that system. Then through your experimentation, because you know that there is more, you have accepted that there's more, where you come to realization that in fact there is more, because that more is everywhere of your experience. Just that you did not apprehend it. If you open yourself, you say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Mhm.
So evidence comes to you. You acknowledge that evidence. And then you go about now revising what you know. And you start saying that solid doesn't exist. Solid is just a state of things, a pattern. Which frequency is what? Is high or low? What is the frequency of solid relatively to liquid?
Low?
What is the frequency, the pure frequency of solid in relationship to liquid or to gases? What is it? Is it higher or is it lower?
Lower?
I don't think there's an answer. You can say it's lower because if you ride it, you feel it all the time. You can say higher if you take the principle of the blades that you shoot it. Because if the blade is fast enough, whatever ball that you throw at it is going to bounce back. It's going to be the effect of solid, right? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If I'm on a blade that is turning very slow, I have the impression that that thing is just that the reality is there. So it's hard, right? But if I'm throwing dart at the blade that goes very fast, every dart will bounce back because the relative speed of rotation of a blade is so high in comparison to my linear speed that my experiment is always going to that it bounces back. What will my conclusion be? That there is a surface there. Although that surface is spinning at the relative frequency that is so high in comparison to me. So, but in pure principle, all of this was just a relationship, isn't it?
Mm.
It wasn't a hardwired reality. It just the impression of my experience at that cycle. When Steve comes back with what he showed when I joined this call, you start realizing that, hey, it's all, you know, there is no solid actual isn't Steve? That's what we were saying.
Yeah.
At whatever level, there is a hole that you can go through.
That's right. Nothing
Yes.
is solid. Everything is
Yes.
moving.
Yeah. And that is what I think Bucky would like us to understand, is that we were deployed into this universe to be local gatherers, winnowers, storers, transmitters of information, let's call it that, for the reason of stitching in together, repairing, being the local mechanic of the eternally regenerative universe. But being a local mechanic doesn't mean that we are unique. in its wisdom, universe can dispense of us and do it another way. Like in the wisdom of me as the owner of a car, I could take it to one mechanic. If I'm disappointed in that mechanic, I have a choice of another mechanic or something else. I have even a choice of discarding the car and buying a brand new car. That's what I sense into this, into what he said. Yes, we have a role locally as support for an eternally regenerative universe, or as builders of stars, as Bucky says. We are star builders. But we have to know that we're doing it on the general principles, that they're eternal. And whatever it is, we have to have also in mind that in this form, we are limited. This experiment will end. So we've got to be conscious of what it is. That's why Bucky talked about anti-entropism. Something that is anti-entropic is something that tries to preserve in the best way possible the form in which that it is. That's called anti-entropic. Because entropy is not disorder, as every good scientist today realize. Entropy is just an order of a different order.
There's a great video on how entropy is, without entropy, life would not exist. Entropy is the foundation of life. I'm going to look for that and see if I can find it in here. Another thing that Manu said that was really good, and this is one of the basic themes about Bucky, is that Bucky did everything from a teleological approach. In other words, he is more interested in the purpose of a thing rather than the cause of a thing. So something is in front of me. I can say, well, what caused this? Or I can say, what is the purpose of this? And that teleological approach to what is the purpose of this thing is a lot more practical question than what caused it, right? It doesn't matter what caused it. The question is, what purpose can it serve?
Exactly.
That's right. Yeah, that is essential. You know, and that means something to everybody. You know,
Yeah.
that everybody has a purpose, and how you discover that purpose, or how you see that purpose, you know, it's up to you. It's personal, and but it's essential. And yet, to think about things instead of purposes and causes, yeah, I think that's a much more healthier and practical way to live.
A lot of people tend to confuse teleology with Machiavellism. It's not the same. It's very, very different. Because Machiavellists tend to say, okay, the means justify the end, right? That's grossly, you know, like a little bit, you know, saying as what Machiavelli said. But teleology is not that. Teleology says, what is the purpose? Teleology says, if it's there because it has a purpose, right? How can I discover that purpose? And how can I would say use it as if I could use it? Or how can I work towards it? How can I work with it the best I can? So when you say education, is education for what? What is the purpose of education? Is it to fill the brains, or is it to allow people to be critical in making choices? Right? That statistically lead to something, an outcome that is desired.
Yeah.
There seem to be circular questions, but it is very important in my opinion.
I think agreement starts with purpose, and we all agree on purpose, but we don't agree on cause.
We all agree on purpose.
We all agree that maybe that we may frame it differently, but purpose, whether we create it or it feel like it's been created for us, whatever, we all have an idea that we can agree on purpose. But when it comes to causes, I think there's a lot of differing opinions.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's accurate. I have to think that through.
Well, that when Bucky says that, then he goes on to start with his artifacts. He started with the, you look at the next chapter, the geoscope. And the purpose of a geoscope was to have the map of the world reflecting the flow of energy of the world. I mean, of Earth. When I say the world, it's our Earth. The map of it reflect the flow of energy and the densities of energies as it is, rather than what the projection, the Mercatorian or whatever projection that has been shown us, and that we consider true. It's incredible that somebody will consider that, Western Europe or Europe that is 5 million square kilometers is larger than Africa that is 30 million square kilometers. But yet that's what the Mercator projection give, and it form our minds. It inform the way we think. So if you look at if you look then at chapter 5, this geoscope stuff, it will end up with the world map of Bucky. The dimension, sky, ocean, world map. That's what it is about.
Yeah, we're going to move into that. I have a
Yes.
really cool, I found the really cool explanation about how entropy is absolutely critical for life in the universe. I just posted it in the chat, the most misunderstood concept in physics. And I thought that was profound. This idea that without entropy, there would be no life. And the way he explains it is really, really cool. Are you complete, Manu? Any other thoughts or comments from anybody? Okay. And I thought you were waving, but you're not. You're just, you're controlling your screen. I gotcha. I reach up a lot too. Boy, I'll tell you, this the most misunderstood concept in physics. This is really cool. So you're gonna enjoy this. Let me see. What is this one? Yeah, this is where I found it on my computer. Okay, good. All right, now we're starting chapter 5, and here we go. Let's see. Anne, do you want to read for a bit?
Sure.
And it's,
Minute, let me get back. All right. The geoscope. One of the world around's most immediately critical problems is that of how to facilitate the swift development of all human individuals' discovery of all we know about human life on board Spaceship Earth at this moment in universe, and how so to learn in the shortest possible time. We have already referred many times to the world's proton power structure wrought obstacles blocking the critical path to human understanding of the nature of reality. In the Victorian era, into which I was born, reality was everything we could see, smell, hear, taste, and touch. That is what reality had always been. When I was 3 years of age, the electron was discovered. Science said the electron was a non-conceptual phenomenon. Because it was invisible, it could not be photographed. And it didn't make the news. With the inverted commas, the electron was very real, however, because it could give you a shock, could even electrocute you. The new reality being invisible, approximately 99.9% of 20th century science was leading industrial technologies every day, working reality into the ultra and infravisible, the macro astrophysical, and the microatomic electronic metallurgical alloying, chemically reacting, microbiologically, astrophysically exploring ranges of the electromagnetic wave spectrum of universe. And 99.9% of these very real activities are non-directly apprehensible by the bare human senses and are practically discovered and coped with only through powerful micro operative instruments. At the dawning of the 20th century, without warning to humanity, the physical technology of Earthians' affairs was shifted over from a brain-sense reality into a reality apprehended only by instruments, comprehended only by scientifically trained brains, understood and coped with only by experience-educated mind, and employed usefully only through mind's discovery and objectification of special case realizations of the only mathematically expressible laws governing each of the inter-complementary family of scientific generalizations.
Let's pause right there
Stop
just for a second.
Yeah.
Hang on, just because this is the point that I think is so profound, that there was a transition from brain-sensed reality, in other words, what I could see, into a reality only apprehended by instruments, comprehended only by scientifically trained brains. When I showed you a picture of the electromagnetic spectrum over here, only less than 1% of this electromagnetic spectrum can be experienced by human eyeballs. It's this little sliver right here. This is visible light. Everything else was too slow or micro to be observed by the human eye and therefore stored in the human brain, or it was macro too fast to be observed by the eye and therefore stored in the brain. So our existence existed. If I were to take this line right here and cut it all the way across here, that was the limit to human experience. And then we suddenly developed these tools over the last couple of 100 years that have allowed us to see the universe faster than we were able to see it and slower than we were able to see it. But still, there's much more universe out there. In fact, I like to tell people that, okay, what we now can measure is probably represents about as much as the electromagnetic of the field of reality, that the visible light spectrum, as much as the visible light spectrum appears on the electromagnetic field. In other words, just take this thing and move this entire electromagnetic field over to this little slot over here and say, this is the entire electromagnetic field. It's right here. This is the universe. This is the all over here. And we don't even have a way to perceive it. So I thought that that his comments here just had exactly to do, our reality can be apprehended only by instruments, comprehended only by trained people. Most people do not know how to use an electron microscope, and so it takes technology to observe our universe. And I thought that was really a profound point. Anybody else want to say anything?
What does our reality can only be understood by instruments?
Right. What about that?
Apprehended by instruments. What does it imply fundamentally that we must do?
Get some instruments.
But what are instruments?
Their instruments are tools that we create that kind of are metaphors of our own body, but they show us more than what we can see with our eyeballs. I don't know. What are instruments, Manu?
Structures, mathematically.
Right.
Okay.
We have to build upon build in a way to extend our senses. You can
In a way to extend-
extend it that way.
Exactly right.
Before we were just us, isolated. So
Right.
we only could use the brain and our senses that we use every day. But then by concatenating or relating, we can build, we can extend, we can build a structure, we can build something that is able to sense, between inverted commas, to sense what is. And that's how we are building all of this instrument. And it's interesting that on what you saw there, it put the instrument that we built to extend. Those instrument was on that spectrum that we built to extend our sensing between inverted comma or what is.
Cool. And do you want to read another paragraph?
Sure.
The-
Okay. We have also noted how the power structures successively dominant over human affairs had for eons successfully imposed a specialization upon intellectually bright and physically talented members of society as a reliable means of keeping them academically and professionally divided, ergo conquered, powerless. The separate individual's special expert glimpses of the separate invisible reality increments became so infinitesimally fractionated and narrow that they gave no hint of the significant part of their work played in the omni-integrating evolutionary front of total knowledge and its power structure exploitability in contradistinction to its omni-humanity advantaging potentials. Thus, the few became uselessly over-advantaged instead of the many becoming regeneratively even ever more universally advantaged. Wow.
And I just want to say that there are some great videos out there on YouTube with certain scientists who have identified back in the 80s how things started to become so restrictive. Funding was only given to certain projects, and this idea of the infinitesimally fractionated and narrow view of science was intensified in the 80s, and it's starting to loosen up now. These guys are starting to talk about different sciences now and doing it in different ways, and most people have agreed that quantum mechanics has showed us as much as it can show us, and we've got to start looking other places. Whereas in the 80s, everybody was convinced that they were on the verge of a theory of everything. And now Stephen Wolfram, Donald Hoffman, there are guys who are really opening up to these, bringing all these sciences together to create a unified theory. That is happening right now in science right now. So that's pretty cool. He's probably going to talk a little bit more about it. Any other comments or questions?
They are probably not going to find a unified theory.
Say
It
what?
will be unified because it will unify or unify. Once you find it, there will be something else because it's always tangoing.
Yeah. Well,
It's
Stephen
always
Wolfram,
tangoing because if it sees tangoing, everything is finished.
well, except that Stephen Wolfram has developed some actually geometric, they're geotopes, geometric formations that seem to facilitate the structure and flow of quantum mechanics and the phenomena in our universe, and they come very, very close to what Bucky said in the first place about his jitterbug. There's a thing called an amplituhedron they're talking about. An
Well,
amplitude.
you are recognizing the dance. That's all. You're recognizing that you will never separate. It's a unified theory. So it is always in two. So how do you prove that it's always in two? Because Wolfram say a concept, if I understand well, the concept of Wolfram is like you have clouds all around, and then you have like, like another sphere inside, and there's always bubbling. That is the micro, basically. So it's like from this inner stuff, we're always bubbling with ideas into knowing the whole of that stuff. And that bubbling itself is what is our activity.
It's our what?
It is our activity and ours, the nature of what we do.
The nature of what we do.
Dance, yes.
Really cool. Okay, are we ready to proceed? Joe, do you want to read?
Sure. In addition to the difficulties of popular comprehension imposed by the invisibility of the frontiers of everyday reality, and B, specialization as an obstacle to popular apprehension and comprehension of what life is all about, which obstacles A and B must be effectively vanquished within the 1980s if humanity is to continue on our planet. We now discover another formidable obstacle that must also be vanquished by 1990. That obstacle C is humanity's inability to see more than a very limited number of rates of emotion. Humans cannot see humans growing either bodily or as local human tissue. Humans cannot see the notion of the hour and minute hands of the clock or of the physical growth of trees. Humans can realize only retrospectively that they have grown because their clothes no longer fit. Humans find that trees have grown because yesteryear's view has been cut off. 99.9% of what humans can see comprehendingly is the belated after effects of what happened.
Okay,
Most of the important.
let's pause here. Let's pause here for just a second. This is exciting. Are you getting this? That human beings we don't see ourselves getting old. We know we get old over time, but we just can't watch it, right? It's to come back to this frequency of occurrence thing that he's talked about with the propeller. We can't see our cells change, and yet every 7 days our body has completely changed molecular. On average, has changed its molecular content over 7 days. We don't see those changes. I have a great video on multiple dimensional reality, and it has an excellent explanation of a fourth dimension, viewing the fourth dimension as duration or time, which is one metaphor for understanding a 4D reality. I actually have 2 or 3 really good metaphors to understand fourth dimensions, but this one is called 10 Dimensions Explained. I'm going to put it in the chat. And then when you can, if you guys will watch it up through the fourth dimension, it has a really good example of showing how a human being's 3-dimensional body appears through a fourth dimension. It's constantly changing. Just the same way a 3-dimensional balloon appears in a 2-dimensional space as a circle, as a dot, and then a circle getting bigger and bigger, then a circle getting smaller and smaller, and a dot. That's explained in that video as well. But this is really cool, the way he explains here about humanity's inability to see certain aspects of our lives. And I'm going to put a chapter on this in my book. Humans cannot see the motion of the hour hand and the minute hand of the clock. We look at a clock and we know it's changing time, but we have to really sit and meditate in order to observe that. And we judge our entire world based on that 3-dimensional view of reality. And adding time to it is a great way to see there's a purpose in everything that occurs. This comes back to the teleology. Anyway, I wanted to point that out. I thought that was quite profound. Any other comments or thoughts on that?
The most misunderstood dimension and the most overlooked is lag. Lag is a dimension.
Yeah.
Time is not a dimension. And the way most people talk about it is in such a way that most people will confuse lag and time.
Mm.
Lag is a dimension. If you define dimensions of any polyhedra as the minimum independent number of turns that is required for you to go full cycle. You understand what I'm saying? The
I think so.
minimum number of turns or varying that are independent, that is required for me to come back to the same, to full circle, that is to composite it in a way that I represent it wholly. Imagine a puzzle or something that you are cut into a puzzle, into pieces. What are the minimum number of pieces? You know, like if I take this ball, this hat like this, and I cut it into pieces. This is, by the way, whatever it is. If I cut it into pieces, I'm cutting not only these pieces that are at the surface, but also the pieces that are inside, isn't it?
Mm.
So I end up having a puzzle of a mix of all of those pieces. What is the minimum number of these that are required for me to be able to recompose them like this in such a way that I have that form?
What is the minimum number?
Is what I have here.
Yeah. What is the minimum number?
And here it is it's 20.
Cool.
I think. I have to count the number of these. The number of
I thought you had them numbered inside.
that is 5 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is 10 here. Plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What is it? I will tell you, it's something like that. But I just want you to understand the concept. In that, when we talk about time, this came to me from a comment that Steve said. He said the metaphor of time. Time is derived from lag, but time is not fundamental. Lag is fundamental.
Mm.
And it could relate directly to entropy, which is
Yes, that's what. Yes, it has to do with our experience.
Exactly right.
We need a minimum of turns that are in a lag, because the lag is only a succession of turns of something happening that turn, and come back to where it is. Then I realized that this is a circle. Because remember, in relationship to that circle, I'm an ant. I need, as an ant, in relationship to the circle, to realize that, hey, I've gone like this and I've come back to this. Because say I saw yellow at this point. I go bam, 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 on Steve's spectrum. I travel, taking 10, seeing different things. And I come here on yellow again. Yes. That's one lag that has happened. It's independent of me observing. It is what it is. That is a dimension. But my measure of it, of identifying one yellow and another yellow, to even know that it is yellow. I first needed to mark something that appeared like yellow. And then I go again. When I come to yellow again, wow, that's it. You get me?
We're not marching in step with time, we're marching in step
Yes,
with each other.
The lag is fundamental. So you have the concept, your tetrahedron, your fundamental tetrahedron will be energy, no, it will be boundary, space, right?
Mhm.
And then it will be flow and lag. When you set a boundary, you create space. Or vice versa, if you create space, every space has boundary. So it's a duality. When you say you flow, energy flows, energy always flows to the line of least resistance. If it flows to the line of least resistance, it's taking a curvature, it will come back. Black hole stars, lag. So, boundary, space, flow, lag is the four words that create the first tetrahedron, the first reality.
I love the way you make this stuff up. Yeah, because might as well think tetrahedrally. So very cool. Any comments
Yeah,
or questions?
minimum things. Everything that we see
Yeah.
is tetrahedral at minimum.
And if Richard were here, he might debate to you as to what those four things are, but he would agree with you that it's tetrahedral. He would agree
Yes.
that it's a tetrahedron. And then
But
we
you remember with Kelly, we always try to have you remember that? We always try to make four words that
Yeah.
make sense.
Right.
Create a structure.
Yeah, it helps the brain think in terms of relationships. What
Yes.
relationship is important here? Yeah, beautiful. And it's 10:49 my time, which means it's freaking 12:49 in Joe's time. And he's had an eventful day. So
Sorry, Joe, that's the best for me. We won, and then the day just started. We're going to celebrate.
within an hour, Manu will be drunk. He'll be celebrating. No, Manu doesn't
No,
drink.
last night, okay,
Yeah.
Joe, I shouldn't say this is recorded, we're in a pub, an Irish pub. And this guy always wanted to offer me a drink. I said, no, it's late because it was like close to midnight. I'm not-
Yeah, you don't
But
understand.
it was so nice. He didn't get upset. He kept
Good.
on, trying to offer me things, chips,
Yeah.
beer, wine.
Yeah. No, it's midnight. I have a meeting in 5 hours and I am not even home yet and in my bed.
Right.
I don't need the distraction. So, Anne, how are you feeling and what's your takeaway? What are your takeaways today?
The amount of time we spent on just chapter 4, it's been worth every minute. And it is just amazing how we brought self-discipline, or Baki brought self-discipline, God, and the integrity of the generalized universal principles. I'm like, wow. And thank you so much though for Steve to anchor. And the videos I'm taking note because I want to watch them because I think they're very powerful. So thank you for that. And Steve and Joe, thank you for being here, even with you worrying about your mom and everything. And Manu, the summary for chapter 4. Wow. That was you brought everything together from how many months that we've spent on chapter 4 alone. And the last one that you brought up, the teleology and the Machiavellian thingy.
Machiavelli.
Yep. And this whole idea about I've never looked at instruments as a way to extend our senses. I think that alone was just mind blowing for me. Okay, like we use instruments all the time, and we didn't really think about what it actually does for us at its essence, you know. So that was really powerful. So thank you very much. And Manu, how do you feel, and what is your takeaway?
I feel good, obviously,
Mm.
isn't it? Joe, I didn't, sorry if you shared something that was very important, but I didn't hear. I didn't get it. I was late.
So I'm in the hospital with my mom.
Okay, is she better?
She's resting. We'll see tomorrow. A little bit more hope. I'm hoping. We're hopeful. So
The Lord will
hopefully,
heal her, definitely. Really.
Yeah.
Convinced. So yeah, yes, my encouragement to you.
thank you.
Yes. And what I get from here is something that is important to us. The intellect with love, right? Intellect and love. And the intellect, love, and the principle of leverage, that I say is what you call universal gearing. Because all instrumentation is for leveraging, for extending our reach. Right? The things that I get that Becky is expressing here and that I take away from here. So to you, Joe, please, my love to you, to your mom. And how do you feel? What do you take away?
Feel like I'm not alone. So that's the first thing. I definitely wanted to keep the routine. And seeing you guys is so it's been helpful. It really has. There's chapter 4 was a challenge. And I think that we really coming down every time we talk about the brain-mind relationship. I really do appreciate that, because there's actually so much discussion about it, especially these days. Also understanding the concepts that that you laid out with the boundary space, flow, and lag. I'm very appreciative of your ability to teach. And I'll say that. And Stephen, I appreciate the effort in the videos, and Anne, you would have loved it. I think we all would have loved it. But we were I mentioned that I was really fortunate to be able to attend a conference yesterday. It was really cool. It was about energy, and so when we were talking about energy a little bit earlier and trying to define it, it was that kind of it was resonating. I think my main takeaway is I'm grateful, for everybody here. That's what I'm going to say. So, I'm a little bit tired. So maybe I wasn't as eloquent as I did today. But in any case, Steve, how you feel? You take one from that.
Well, I'm real grateful for everybody's commitment to be on this call, and for you to be on this call in a hall in a hospital, and for you finding a place to be here and sharing. We would have had We would have missed you if you hadn't been here, Joe. Thank you for your comments and reading and for your spirit. Gosh, we have a great crew here. I'm just such fans of each of you. I love Manu's brain. I used to try to figure out everything Manu said, and I've given up on that. I just like to breathe in what Manu says and observe what Manu says and see if I can create meaning in my life. I'm grateful, Manu, for your topological brain. And so, and Anne, I love the way you bring the practicality of everything into this call. And it makes it really wonderful for me. I've shared the video on space-time, or on Space is Empty, which talks all about quantum chromodynamics, about energy bubbles up into space-time. And I really want to correlate that back to the electromagnetic field and how we have less than 1% of the energy on the electromagnetic spectrum is visible light. So human beings I judge my life and my purpose in life by that less than 1% of what I see. And yet by getting tools, I can expand my awareness and see this whole universe that's 99.99% invisible to me unless I use those tools. And then the way I like to think of it is that the universe itself is probably 99.99% more than the electromagnetic spectrum. That there's this, that each one is a metaphor of the other, as above, so below, as below, so above. So put the idea of space is empty together with this the electromagnetic spectrum, and I come up with two metaphors that are great for me for understanding the nature of universe. A couple of other, I put in a great video on entropy, and that guy Derek from Vertasium does a great job explaining how life would not be possible if it weren't for entropy. Up until the time I'd seen that video, I thought entropy was like, it was the act of the devil. You know, everything was constantly disorganizing, becoming more random, things die. Entropy was the evil genius against everything wonderful. And then to watch that video and find out that entropy is what makes life happen. And that entropy that I thought was such a bad guy is actually a good guy when it interacts in a universe the way that it does, using general principles, which is profound. And then this idea of time as a dimension, or this idea of referring to a fourth dimension and perceiving the fourth dimension of reality as time. And I actually think that the fourth dimension isn't time, that there's actually a fourth physical dimension that's orthogonal to our three-dimensional universe that we can't see. And maybe one day I'll send out a video on that too, because I think that's really cool. But one aspect, one way of seeing time is perceiving time as a dimension of our reality, of our apparently three-dimensional reality. And I'm convinced that our reality is like multiple dimensions. In quantum mechanics, there's at least 10 or 11 dimensions existing simultaneously. We just don't experience them because we only experience less than 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum, which itself is less than 1% of what's ever possible, I'm sure. Thank you for letting me ramble. There are very few places on this planet where I can ramble about all that stuff and not have people just fall asleep or walk out on me. So thank you for persisting to the very end. And we'll continue chapter 5, the geoscope concepts and all of Bucky's ideas about geoscopetry later on. Manu, you had something to say there?
Yeah, maybe stop the recording.
Oh, yeah. Are we all complete?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. So I will